Now, China has put on a lavish display at the opening of the 2010 Expo in Shanghai. 20 world leaders attended the ceremony, featuring tens of thousands of fireworks that lit up the city's riverfront. Well, the estimates say the Chinese government spent more than $45 billion organising the 6-month event. More than 240 countries, regions and international organisations are using radical architecture to exhibit their culture and achievements. Well, my colleague Michelle Hussein was at the waterfront ceremony, and she joined us a little earlier when the fireworks were going off big time.
The fireworks, which are just getting underway behind me, are the symbol that 6 months of the Shanghai Expo are officially underway. We were promised a spectacular display, and that is exactly what we are getting. Remember that this is an event on which more money has probably been spent than the amount spent on the Beijing Olympics. This is China proving to the world that a big event like the Olympics was not a one-off and that it can do the same thing again. So as we watch the scene in the skies above the Expo site here at Shanghai, with me is our Shanghai correspondent, Chris Hogg. It's all very impressive so far. Chris, what more do you think we can expect?
It is. Apparently they've got 57,000 fireworks that they're planning to let off. They've got the biggest collection of searchlights that's ever been assembled. The guy that's doing the lighting here is the guy who does the lighting for the Oscar ceremonies and for the Super Bowl, and apparently he's never had a box of tricks like this to play with. You can see there on the Lupo Bridge the lights coming down, the fireworks on the top. And also, they've got this huge LED screen, the biggest LED screen anywhere in the world. And it's on that LED screen that they'll be counting down the famous expos.
It's certainly spectacular. One of the things that makes this different, apart from the scale, is that it's happening right over the river.
Yeah, and that's been a huge logistical challenge for the team that are doing this. They were saying that normally in an event like this you would want to close off the river 20 times in order to practice, to get this right. But it's a bit like cutting off a motorway or a highway. It's such a busy and important river for Shanghai. So they were only allowed to close it 5 times. So they haven't really had a lot of chance to practice and to get this right. And there's a whole lot of coordination that they have to get right, because we've got fireworks, we've got lasers, we've got lights, and a little later on we're going to see boats and some quite clever effects on the water itself.
What a sight there in Shanghai.
Music, lights, fireworks. China has done it again, wowed the world with an awe-inspiring opening ceremony. Last year it was the Beijing Olympics, today it was the Shanghai Expo. 20 world leaders were on hand for the spectacular display of Chinese organizational might. Over the next 6 months, China hopes the World's Fair will also showcase the country's economic might. The BBC's Damien Grammaticus was there as the events kicked off.
It's Shanghai's moment to wow the world. A fireworks extravaganza to open the most expensive World Expo ever. The first great exhibition was London, 1851. China hopes this will mark its coming ascendancy. Almost every nation is here with its own pavilion. Finland has a giant sauna. Spain's is made of rattan matting. Denmark has brought Copenhagen's Little Mermaid. But this is China's show, so China's pavilion dwarfs everyone else. It's also Shanghai's chance to impress, just as Beijing did with the Olympics. Vast and sprawling, Shanghai is the showcase for China's modernization. Home to almost 20 million, in just a decade China wants this to be a global financial center. But as with many of this country's grand projects, there's a considerable human cost. Ma Yalian's home was here, one of thousands bulldozed, she says, by developers cashing in on Shanghai's growth. Mrs. Ma and others who tried to get compensation or oppose the expo have been beaten up, detained, even tortured and sent to labour camps.
The expo has nothing to do with ordinary people. The reality of our lives is miserable. because our homes are destroyed illegally. We live in poverty. Our personal freedoms restricted, our human rights severely violated.
But for Shanghai, nothing is going to get in the way of this. Its big party. Just as Beijing put on the most lavish Olympics ever, Shanghai wants the biggest expo, a signal to the world of the scale of this city's ambition. David Maticus, BBC News at the Shanghai World Expo.
Well, it is now Saturday morning in Shanghai, and with the expo officially opening just in a few minutes for the first visitors, we get from Chris Hogg more on what to expect from it. Chris, now that the fireworks are over, this is clearly going to be about economics, right? This is a sign of China's economic prowess in the world.
Yeah, for the countries that have come here and built these spectacular pavilions, this is all about trying to win friends and influence people. Most of the pavilions, if you go and visit them, the person in charge is a diplomat. This is all about so-called soft power. And the Chinese leadership are going to be very pleased with the turnout they've had here. So many nations, 189 different nations, because that shows to their own people that China matters, that other countries in the world think this is an important place, they couldn't afford not to be here.
And Chris, who exactly are those 189 nations trying to woo? Are they talking to each other, or have they come to talk to this new force, the Chinese consumer?
Well, they're really trying to woo two types of people. On the first hand, they're trying to woo the Chinese consumers, as you say. The 95% of the 70 million people that will come here will be ordinary Chinese, and with the growing middle class here, that's an important market. But then there's also going to be more high-level trade delegations going on. I went to the Australian pavilion. They've got more than 200 trade events over the next 6 months. So they say it's important to be here, and also, of course, they wanted a good spot because they're competing with everybody else, with the Brits, with the other Europeans. So in some of these places, they might look like museums, they might look like exhibitions, but this is hardcore diplomacy and selling going on.
Chris, every country that has a World Expo in history has always been terribly proud of hosting them, but it seems to me that this one is a little bit different because we do have this meeting almost of the old world's economy smacking right up against the big new power on the block.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, back in 1851, when you had the great exhibition at Crystal Palace in London, that was really about Britain announcing its superiority in the areas of technology and trade. And for China, this is just as important. Somebody else put it really rather succinctly. The Beijing Olympics was about China throwing a party for the world, but this is about the rest of the world throwing a party for China.
Chris Hogg there in Shanghai. Have fun at the expo. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. And while the scenes in Shanghai are the picture China wants the world to see, there is a disturbing rash of violence in the country's schools. Today, a man killed himself in the eastern city of Weifang after attacking kindergarten students with a hammer and injuring 5 of them. It is the 3rd assault in as many days on young children, and it's prompted the government to demand stricter security at schools nationwide.
Into our top 3 now. Rubbish tips smell. Fact. Well, now in Beijing, they've come up with this. Massive deodorant cannons. That should do it. This man seems to be enjoying the new smell very much.
Now, the Chinese city of Shanghai has opened its multi-billion-dollar World Expo to the public as a showcase for the country's booming economy and resurgent national pride. The site is 20 times bigger than the last World Expo, held in Spain in 2008. And as the BBC's Chris Hogg has discovered, it's proving to be a hit with tens of thousands of visitors willing to queue for hours to see some exhibitions.
It's day 1 of the Shanghai World Expo, and it's a sellout. More than 300,000 tickets have been sold. Now, this park is huge. It's twice the size of Monaco, so it doesn't feel that full. But if you want to go and see one of the more popular attractions here, one of the more popular pavilions, well, you soon get a sense of just how many people there are here, because there are very, very, very long queues. This, for example, is the queue for the Danish pavilion. Denmark got a lot of advanced publicity because they brought the Little Mermaid from Copenhagen, and a lot of people want to see it. So this is the end of the queue. Can I just ask you, how long do you think the wait's going to be?
Maybe 1 hour or 2 hours.
And this is the front of the queue. 你等了几个小时
2个小时
？2 hours. You've been waiting 2 hours.
2个小时
Okay, 2 hours. So this is the exit. How was it? Did you like it?
I like the ride the bicycle.
You like riding the bicycle?
Yes.
How long did you wait for this?
About 2 hours.
And that's okay?
Yes, very well.
There we go. One satisfied customer at the Denmark Pavilion. And I think that response is probably pretty typical. Chinese visitors seem to be prepared to put up with quite a lot, because for most of them, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Across the UK, politicians are out in force this weekend, the last before Thursday's general election.
$1 billion organising the 6-month event. More than 240 countries, regions and international organisations are using radical architecture to exhibit their culture and achievements. Well, my colleague Michelle Hussein was at the waterfront ceremony.
We were promised a spectacular display, and that is exactly what we are getting. Remember that this is an event on which more money has probably been spent than the amount spent on the Beijing Olympics. This is China proving to the world that a big event like the Olympics was...
She joined us a little earlier when the fireworks were going off big time.
The fireworks, which are just getting underway behind me, are the symbol that 6 months of the Shanghai EXPO are officially underway. It's not a one-off, and that it can do the same thing again. So as we watch the scene in the skies above the Expo site here at Shanghai, with me is our Shanghai correspondent, Chris Hogg. It's all very impressive so far, Chris. What more do you think we can expect?
It is apparently...
Now, China has put on a lavish display at the opening of the 2010 Expo in Shanghai. 20 world leaders attended the ceremony, featuring tens of thousands of fireworks that lit up the city's riverfront. Well, the estimates say the Chinese government spent more than $45 billion